excited to welcome you in for our first full official episode of the Wealth Cafe. Everyone's excitement from last week's little teaser and intro to the Wealth Cafe was just so exciting that I am over the moon and just really prepared to share so many different topics with you. And today, I thought we would dive into something that comes up a lot in my conversations with clients, and it is risk tolerance. And not only risk tolerance, right? I feel like that's kind of the 1.0 is figuring out your risk tolerance. Then the 2.0 in financial planning is understanding how your risk tolerance changes, right? That's kind of part of life that we don't always talk about. And so we are going to dive into today how your risk tolerance changes as you age and also as you get closer to retirement. Is really, it's not necessarily about your age and your number, it's as you get closer to retirement. And so when we talk about risk tolerance, we'll do that kind of 1.0 review here of risk tolerance is how much risk you are willing to take on or how much money you would feel okay losing, at least for a portion of time, knowing that in the longer run, you will hopefully be able to make more money, make up the losses. And it is, I call it that feeling in your stomach, right? If you open your statement and you want to throw up, you probably have too much risk. However, if you're sitting there thinking, okay, this is for a portion of time, I know that we can recover from this and we are in it for the long haul, or we know that this is a longer term investment and we can ride this out, then you're in the right set of risk tolerance. However, I think so many of us think of our 20-year-old selves, right? We think of that bright eyed, bushy tailed, just graduated from college student who thought they could take on an endless amount of risk, right? Like they are ready to seize the day. They want to buy the new up and coming stock. And this is all, over exaggeration here to some extent, right? But we all kind of knew we had this longer length of time and could ride out this volatility. Well, that changes as we age. And a really good example of this is if you have a 401k that holds target date funds, you will notice that target date funds, as they are getting closer to their maturity or that date that's listed on there. So we'll take an example of if you have a 2050 target date fund, we are then 25 years out from retirement. So you'll start to see that shift of less stocks are being invested and you have a lot more safer things like bonds and CDs. And it used to be that you had a really large portion of stocks and investments in small caps and mid caps and international stocks that were taking up the portfolio, and a really small portion of bonds. However, now as we're getting closer to that 2050 mark, you're probably noticing things start to change, right? And at some point, you'll hit this equilibrium where it is 50-50 stocks and bonds. And then slowly the bonds will take over because we need that safety and that money. As we're getting closer to retirement, we don't necessarily always have that time to wait out market volatility and the different things going on. And as we know, market volatility comes and goes. Raise your hand if you lived through the pandemic. Yes, we all remember March of 2020 when stocks were all over the place and we were sitting here going, "Oh my gosh, what is going to happen?" But we can now look back, hindsight being 2020, and sitting here in the year 2024 saying, things recover. We always come back. We are able to survive and come back hopefully stronger. However, as we get closer to retirement, we don't necessarily have that length of time. And so this is a really hard concept to talk people through because it's that realization of things are shifting, things are changing. The risk that you took on as that bright eyed, bushy tailed 20-year-old, it might not be the level of risk you're willing to take on 10, 5, or even a year out from retirement because you want to have that safety and security. But what I want to touch on today is yes, although you are shrinking the amount of exposure you may have to stocks in your portfolio, that doesn't mean we're totally out. And this is a conversation that you should have with your financial advisor if you work with one, or as you look at your own portfolio, get a good feel for, okay, what ratio do I have? What percent of stocks do I have versus bonds or other safe assets like CDs in my portfolio? And also think about how far away you are from retirement. I don't necessarily like to give clients when I'm working with them, okay, at this age, you should have this percent. At this age, you should have a this percent, in stocks and bonds, and then to see it shrinking. Because here's two things. Number one, retirement looks so different for everybody, whether you're going to partially retire, whether you're going to retire early or late. Things also look different in terms of, once again, your risk tolerance. Yes, you should be becoming less risk averse because you want that safety in your money as you are aging. However, that doesn't mean we also have to get rid of all of it. And so I try to work with clients to get them to understand, and I also want to understand from them what level of risk are we willing to take on. This is also something that we like to model out. And so saying, okay, here's where we see the volatility, can we ride this out? When we're doing a financial plan, what would happen if we have a recession in the years leading into retirement? Can we withstand that? And the answer is different for everyone. I wish I could sit here and say, okay, here's the magic crystal ball. Here's exactly what percent of stocks and bonds you should be in. Here is where you need to be in terms of, your comfort level. But that is part of the conversation between advisor and client, or if you manage your own finances, the conversation that you need to be having with yourself. So the one example I like to give is Mary and Joe. Mary and Joe are about to retire. And so they know in the first 5 years of their retirement, they are going to need $300,000. They then need to gauge and work with their advisor to figure out, okay, what level of risk are we willing to take on if we need this money to begin with, right? That money they should be keeping safer. And they need to have the conversation as well and be modeling out, okay, what do we need for 3 years? What do we need for 5 years? What do we need for 10 years? And so in other videos, we're going to start diving into what retirement looks like, how to gauge how much you need. All of these topics we will be covering over the span of the Wealth Cafe and so much more. But Mary and Joe have decided that they need $300,000 in the first 5 years. So they may decide then to work with their advisor to find a mix of safer investments. However, they also may have funds that they don't need to touch for 20 to 30 years into retirement. Remember, we live a lot longer now. Retirement isn't what it used to be, and you could have money that you don't need to touch for another decade or two, maybe even three, depending on how long you think you're going to live, how long your family has lived, all of the factors. So it is important to take into consideration, okay, what money do we need in the near future? What money could we potentially need in the near future? And what money do we not need to touch for a really long time? That money that you don't need to touch for a really long time is something that you could say, you know what? We're going to maintain our original risk tolerance there from pre retirement and keep that invested in the market. Once again, this is personal. So making sure you are sitting down and having conversations with everyone involved. And also, to make sure you understand, right? Understand what are the lockups behind this money, right? If you have to touch money early, let's say some CDs or bonds have penalties. If you need to reach out to that money early, understand all of that. That also plays into your risk tolerance, right? Not all money here is free, and there are some penalties and consequences to withdrawing. So, making sure you are understanding what your new risk tolerance is, what are the investments in money that you need to touch sooner? Are there any penalties behind it? And also know this, your risk tolerance is going to change. It should, right? Going back to that bright eyed, bushy tailed 20-year-old, when that was Mary and Joe, they were willing to take on the world. If their investments tanked or lost money, they had plenty of time to recover. They had all of these working years, they could see the ebbs and flows of the market. However, they just want to go off into retirement. Keep in mind, you need to consider in your risk tolerance what level of risk do you need to take on to have enough money during retirement, right? That also plays into this and should allow you to see, okay, we don't need to take on as much risk. For what we want to do in retirement, we can just ride out into the sunset and we are all good. Or you may need to take on more risk. Once again, I encourage you to talk to your financial advisor or financial team about this because it's different for everybody. And the last thing I'm going to say is I encourage you to be honest during this process, right? It can be really hard to understand, okay, we don't have as much time as we once did. And we want to make sure we are able to maintain our lifestyle and live our dream life in retirement. And if that means taking on more risk, that's okay. But you might have investments you want to leave for the kids and the grandkids, and you decide they are young, they can ride out the volatility. Let's maintain that risk for them. However, for our money that we need to touch during retirement and in the early retirement years, we want to keep that safe. Your risk tolerance was meant to change. It was always going to and will continue to do so the older you get. And that is just part of the process, right? Easier said than done. And know that it will take time to see those adjustments and to see it's so easy to turn on the TV and see CNBC and to see market returns are up this much. Know, though, that you are giving a part of that up for the safety and security that you are having. Like I said, have this conversation with your spouse, significant other, yourself, your financial team, because things are going to change and they will. I can't wait for you to join us next week. We have some great content coming up for the rest of the summer and some amazing things. Once again, if there are any videos that you want to see or content you want us to cover, please feel free to reach out to us and we will make sure we get it on our agenda. See you soon.
Thanks for watching this week's episode of The Wealth Cafe. Looking to learn more about financial planning and wealth management? Visit tanisfingroup.com to apply for an introductory call today. Check us out on YouTube and LinkedIn for weekly episodes of The Wealth Cafe, and be sure to subscribe for more finance-related content and shots of espresso.